In the history of flight, every tragedy writes a new rule, every crash exposes a hidden flaw, and every life lost becomes a lesson that makes the skies safer for the rest of us. From fires on the runway, to explosions mid-air, to simple mistakes with devastating consequences, these weren't just accidents, they were turning points. Behind every black box is a story, and behind every story, a change that shaped the future of aviation. This is not just about disaster, it's about evolution, innovation, and the price we've paid to make flying the safest form of travel on Earth. These are the 10 plane crashes that changed everything. On March 3, 1974, Turkish Airlines Flight 981 took off from Paris bound for London. There were 346 people on board. It was a full flight on a wide-body DC-10. Just minutes after takeoff, disaster struck. The rear cargo door blew open mid-flight, causing sudden decompression. Control cables were severed. The pilots lost all ability to steer the aircraft. Within seconds, the plane plunged into the Ermenonville forest at over 400 miles per hour. Everyone on board was killed. At the time, it was the deadliest aviation disaster the world had ever seen. But this wasn't a random accident. A similar cargo door issue had happened 2 years earlier on another DC-10. That flight landed safely. But warnings were ignored. No major changes were made. Flight 981 forced the Concorde industry to act. Cargo doors were redesigned. Safety regulations became stricter because of this crash. But the lessons it taught have saved countless lives. And that's how the victims left a legacy that still flies with us today. On August 22, 1985, British Airtours Flight 28M was preparing for takeoff at Manchester Airport. But as the aircraft taxied down the runway, an engine suddenly exploded. Flames and smoke rushed into the cabin. Panic spread. Some passengers escaped quickly, but 55 others were trapped inside, overcome by thick, toxic smoke within seconds. The fire lasted less than a minute, yet the materials inside the plane, the narrow exits, and poor evacuation design made survival nearly impossible. This tragedy led to sweeping changes in aircraft safety. Fire-resistant cabin materials, floor-level lighting, clearer exits, and a new rule: every plane must be fully evacuable in 90 seconds. British Airtours Flight 28M was a tragedy, but it taught the world that safety on the ground is just as important as safety in the air. December 28, 1978. United Airlines Flight 173 is approaching Portland when the crew notices a problem with the landing gear. They begin circling, troubleshooting, checking lights and indicators. But in the chaos, no one notices the fuel running dangerously low. The engines shut down, one by one. The plane crashes into a suburban neighborhood. 10 people lose their lives. The problem wasn't the landing gear, it was communication. The co-pilot didn't speak up clearly. The captain didn't listen. From this crash came a major breakthrough in aviation: crew resource management. A system that trains flight crews to work as a team, challenge decisions, and prevent deadly silence. On May 11, 1996, ValuJet Flight 592 took off from Miami heading for Atlanta. Just 6 minutes into the flight, something was wrong.
Smoke began filling the cabin. The crew couldn't locate the source. Unbeknownst to them, a fire was raging in the cargo hold, caused by improperly stored oxygen canisters.
The heat grew intense. The controls failed. And then, silence. The DC-9 plunged into the Florida Everglades. All 110 people on board were killed. This tragedy exposed shocking gaps in airline safety and oversight. As a result, hazardous cargo laws were rewritten and fire suppression systems were required in all aircraft cargo holds.
ValuJet 592 taught us a brutal truth. A single overlooked detail can bring down an entire plane.
On February 12, 2009, Colgan Air Flight 3407 approached Buffalo, New York. The weather was icy, visibility low, but the real danger was inside the cockpit. As the aircraft stalled, the captain panicked. Instead of pushing the nose down, he pulled up. The co-pilot, exhausted and undertrained, made no correction. The plane spiraled and crashed into a suburban home. All 49 people on board, and one on the ground, were killed. The investigation uncovered shocking truths. Both pilots were severely fatigued. One had commuted overnight across the country just to report for duty. This crash forced new rules, stricter pilot training, better fatigue management, and higher hiring standards. Colgan 3407 proved that skill alone isn't enough. Pilots need rest, focus, and time in the seat. On July 25, 2000, the Concorde, the pride of supersonic travel, prepared for takeoff from Paris. It was sleek, fast, elite. But what happened next would bring its legacy to a crashing end. As the jet accelerated, a strip of metal on the runway shredded one of its tires. Debris from the tire pierced the fuel tank. In seconds, fire erupted beneath the left wing. With one engine failing and the plane struggling to gain altitude, the Concorde lost control. Just 2 minutes after liftoff, it slammed into a nearby hotel. All 109 on board and 4 on the ground were killed. Investigators found the fault in a tiny piece of metal and outdated safety designs. Fuel tanks were reinforced, runway safety standards were rewritten, the world's most advanced jet brought down by a scrap of metal. Flight 4590 proved that even legends are vulnerable, and safety is never guaranteed. On June 1, 2009, Air France Flight 447 took off from Rio de Janeiro bound for Paris. Hours into the flight, it vanished from radar. No distress call, no emergency signal. For days, the ocean offered no answers, until search teams found the wreckage deep in the Atlantic. Black box data revealed a chilling truth. Ice crystals had blocked the plane's speed sensors, causing the autopilot to shut off. The pilots became confused and unknowingly stalled the aircraft. For 4 minutes, they fought the controls, but never recovered. 228 lives were lost. The crash exposed how modern pilots relied too heavily on automation and weren't trained to handle its failure. Flight 447 became a turning point, sparking global changes in pilot training, manual flying, and cockpit awareness. Because when the systems fail, human instinct must take the lead. March 27, 1977. 2 fully loaded Boeing 747s prepared for takeoff on a foggy runway in Tenerife, Canary Islands. They would never leave that runway. A terrorist threat had diverted planes from nearby airports. The ramp was overcrowded, visibility was low. One aircraft was told to hold position, but the other began its takeoff roll. They never saw each other. They collided at full speed. In seconds, the runway turned into a firestorm. 583 people were killed, making it the deadliest aviation accident in history. But it wasn't caused by a mechanical fault. It was a tragic miscommunication between pilots and air traffic control. This disaster changed aviation forever. It led to standardized cockpit language, stricter communication protocols, and the global adoption of the phrase "cleared for takeoff." August 12, 1985. Japan Airlines Flight 123 took off from Tokyo headed for Osaka. 12 minutes later, the tail section exploded. A rear pressure bulkhead, improperly repaired years earlier, failed catastrophically. The tail fin ripped away. The plane lost all hydraulic control, but somehow the pilots kept the jet in the air for 32 agonizing minutes. They fought for control, they circled mountains, and then the inevitable. The plane crashed into Mount Takamagahara. 520 people died, only 4 survived. This wasn't sabotage, it wasn't weather, it was a botched repair and a missed inspection. One maintenance mistake brought down a jumbo jet. Flight 123 exposed the brutal truth. An overlooked detail on the ground can cost hundreds of lives in the sky. Since then, aircraft maintenance standards haven't just changed, they've become unforgiving. August 14th, 2005. Helios Airways Flight 522 took off from Cyprus, but it would fly for over 2 hours with no one in control. Soon after takeoff, the crew failed to pressurize the cabin. At 34,000 feet, the air grew thin. Oxygen masks deployed, but the pilots were already fading. Everyone on board, 121 souls, slowly lost consciousness. The plane flew on autopilot until it ran out of fuel. It crashed into a hillside near Athens. No one survived. The investigation revealed a fatal checklist error. The pressurization switch had been left in manual mode. Alarms were misunderstood. Procedures failed. They called it the ghost plane. Helios 522 showed how silence in the cockpit can mean no one is left alive to respond. Every crash we've covered changed aviation forever. Each one taught a lesson, written in lives lost and systems rebuilt. At FlyHigh Hub, we bring you the stories behind the headlines, the moments that shaped the skies. If you found this video powerful, like, subscribe, and join us for more untold stories of aviation. Thanks for watching. Until next time, stay safe and keep flying high.